Hello everyone, Patrick Reagan here. Sorry, my voice was hoarse for a second. You may remember my adaptation ideas episode where I talked about the Dreamhouse Kings and teased Land of the Lost and Illusion of Gaia. Well, to be frank, I ended up being not very satisfied with that video as I feel like I didn't go into too much detail. And I also feel that since I'm still rather small on YouTube, these videos probably won't get enough attention. And I wanted to bring more attention to these obscure IPs I want to adapt, so I figured I'd lump them all into one consecutive video to bring attention to them. So I'm going into more detail on Dreamhouse Kings. I'll also be discussing Illusion of Gaia and Land of the Lost, so this will likely be a long video where I discuss them and how I'd adapt them. So here we go, we'll start with Dreamhouse Kings. Again. So one of the reasons I've been fixated on this is because I'm currently living in Colorado, and I've heard that this book series' author, Robert Liparulo, also lives in Colorado. While I don't plan to stay in Colorado long term, I still want to make the most of it while I'm here, so I'm thinking of working with him to adapt this series, and I think that would be a great idea as it's something I've wanted to do since 2009. So this series and the other books from Robert Liparulo are young adult thriller novels in the Christian fiction category. Now, I just want to point this out that since a lot of people take this the wrong way, but when you hear the term Christian fiction, it is not, I repeat, not claiming that Christianity is fiction. It just means they're fictional stories with Christian themes, and Robert Liparulo, being a Christian, portrays his themes very respectfully. But these are still fictional stories, especially considering that Dreamhouse Kings involves going through portals to different times. But I just wanted to clear that up, especially since these books are very PG-13 with minimal violence, no sexual content, and no swearing, unless you count words like sucks, crap, or fart as swear words. You may not count that as swear words, but I grew up in the South, so. Anyway, what this book series is about is it follows a family, the father being named Edward or Ed, and the mother being named Gertrude, though she is called G because she's too old to be a Gertrude. The protagonists are the two brothers, the 15-year-old movie buff named Xander, and the 12-year-old soccer-playing video game nerd named David. They have a 9-year-old sister named Toria who loves to annoy them, and since their last name is King, they are named after various famous kings and queens, with Xander being Alexander and Toria being Victoria. They move to the fictional Pinedale, California, to the seemingly abandoned Victorian house known locally as the Old Koenig Place. Robert Liparulo mentioned in an interview that Koenig is German for king, and it has some significance I don't want to give away, as it's a little spoilery. As they move into the Victorian house, they notice a few oddities, such as people being where they shouldn't, sound waves emanating in different areas, and the attic being in the boys' bedroom and being rather small for an attic. One of the weirdest things they find is that their linen closet teleports them to a locker at their school. As they continue exploring, they find the strangest thing yet. They find that the reason the attic was so small is because it is only a small portion of the attic, and the entire roof has a secret hallway behind a secret door that blends into the wall. This hallway is designed in a weird way that has 20 doors leading to small antechambers. These antechambers have various items, and when warned, they open the next door, which is a portal to that coinciding time period, and the antechambers change every time. For example, if you open a door with World War II items, then close it for a while, then open it back again, it'll now have items from the Roman Colosseum. Meanwhile, there's an old man named Jesse Wagner who has some connection to the house, and he wants to get back to protect the new inhabitants, utilizing the help of his military nurse friend Keel. There's also an evil man named James Taxidian who wants the house for his own selfish desires. He is very cunning and conniving, and he's able to get away with murder, both literally and figuratively. During their stay, the mother, G, is kidnapped and taken to one of the portals, mirroring an event that happened 30 years before in the prologue, so the family has to stay to find her, which is not easy. There's some more to the story, but this requires me to let out some spoilers, so I just want to give you that warning. If you want to read the books first and not have this spoiled, please skip ahead to this timestamp. Alright, now without further ado, here we go. So it was revealed that Ed made the move to the house because he was the kid from the prologue whose mother was kidnapped. He and his family kept it secret, so everyone in Pinedale thinks that the father killed his family in a house, a la The Shining. Ed's father, Hank, gave up, but Ed came back, and this led to an argument with him and Xander. Jesse meets the family, revealing himself to be a great-great-uncle to them, and he's the one who built the house. He is trying to keep Taxidian from using it because Taxidian was an assassin named Dagon from ancient Assyria who stumbled into a portal by accident, leading him to the house somewhere in the 1960s. That's one of the unique things about the antagonist, that instead of him being something like the first time traveler or the inventor of the portals, he was just a random person in history who likely would have been forgotten, amounting to just a random pile of bones that archaeologists would find and have no knowledge of his origin. Yet he just stumbled upon a portal by accident, and circumstances made him something significant of himself. Taxidian severely injures Jesse, but he leaves clues for the boys to find an antechamber leading to the house in 1939 when it was being built, where they meet a young Jesse. This isn't in the book, but in an interview, Liparulo mentions that Jesse's brother Aaron named this place the König place so he could disassociate himself from it, with König, of course, being German for king. Another small detail mentioned in the interview is that the portals are created by currents of time, as seen in the final book, but they create little, as he calls, shrapnel portals that lead to different places, such as the linen closet one leading to the school. One of these was in the basement and led to a piece of land which Taxidian used to build his house on, so Jesse and Aaron walled off that area in the basement, and Taxidian used it to hide his bodies, which creates a bone pit that David gets trapped in. The boys also find that they indirectly save history, such as David saying Marguerite in World War II, and thus helping the flu vaccine to be created. They save another life in the Civil War, and they also find Ed's mother, Kimberly. Also, after saving the soldier in the Civil War, thus allowing Ulysses S. Grant to become president, they go to a medieval dungeon. David distracts an executioner, and they bring him to another time in the Alps, where the executioner falls to his well-deserved death. Unfortunately, this accomplished nothing, as the people in that dungeon were doomed to be tortured, likely by another executioner. This is an interesting bit of character development, as it shows that they aren't able to fix absolutely everything, and David feels very down that his heroic action accomplished nothing whatsoever. That's a bit of nuance that a film adaptation should keep. In the end, they save the mother from the Middle Eastern time, where they also meet Jesus, and they come back to the house for a final confrontation with Taxidian. Now here, Liparulo mentioned that he wanted the main conflict to be resolved, but to still leave it open. In this case, he figured killing off Taxidian would be too easy, so the way Taxidian is defeated is that his portal sucks him back to his time, because if you stay too long, the portal will reclaim you. This is why Taxidian hasn't stayed in the house and was staying away from it despite wanting it. In a way, though, this fate is worse than death, because he's trapped back in his time with various diseases, no modern technology, and no guarantee that he would find another portal, so he would be very likely to die and be forgotten to history. And even though he was defeated, his damage was still done, so the King family still has to undo all of it, though they are hopeful enough to accomplish it. It is also worth noting that there is only one time period that leads to the future. Ed mentions this place he used to visit as a kid, a peaceful meadow with beautiful skies, trees, a creek, and woodland creatures. However, when they go past the hill, they see a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, which is the future that'll happen because of Taxidian. Okay, so I'm now back to the spoiler-free elements, and I want to go into detail on how I would adapt this. First, we'll look at the story. This could be adapted into a 6-movie series, or it could be adapted as a miniseries. This is also different from Harry Potter, as that series has every story being a different year. For this series, the entirety of it takes place over the course of 3 weeks, so this could be easily shot back to back, so that the actors, especially the child actors, stay the same age throughout. I also feel there's one major change I would do. You see, in the final book, Frenzy, they go through a portal that takes them to the set of the movie Predator. While this is cool, this would likely be difficult in terms of actors and copyright problems, so I had this idea of adding a fake movie within the movie called Extraterrestrial Apocalypse, which Xander watches a lot, and they go to the set of this instead to make it consistent. I also feel that while I want this to be as close and faithful to the books as possible, some changes will have to be made, simply because what works in books isn't always going to translate well to film. That's just the unfortunate reality with adaptations, and I feel it's good to distinguish good changes from bad ones. The changes made to The Last Airbender were terrible because they had no real good reason to be made and didn't benefit from the story. But something like cutting Tom Bombadil out of Lord of the Rings was completely justified because he served no purpose to the story, and having him in the movie would have felt like 20 minutes of filler that goes absolutely nowhere. Now for this, there's nothing I would cut, as everything in the books work fine and could be translated pretty well to a movie. But the way some of the books begin and end would likely be changed. For example, the second book ends with David telling Xander he thinks that he found his mom. Then the third book starts right after. That works for a book, but for a film, it basically would make it feel like the ending and beginning. It would basically make it feel less like an ending and a beginning and more like a stop and a start. So I combined the beginning of the third book into the ending of the second. Also, the second book goes into detail on Taxidian's backstory, and even has a nightmare about it. I figured I would have him wake up from the nightmare but not show what it is in the second movie. Then his nightmare would be the cold opening of the third film for foreshadowing. The first, second, and sixth books have cold openings, but I figured I would add cold openings to each one that ties into the themes of what they're about. This would also add some foreshadowing to Taxidian's backstory, which is finally revealed in the third one, as mentioned before. I also had an idea for a scene to add in the last one, which is where David and Xander accidentally enter a portal where they are at their childhood home and sneakily see themselves when they were younger and when their family was happy together. This would also make Xander emotional, as he feels he hasn't appreciated his father enough. Here, this is different, but it still fits in with the themes of the books, so this would be a good change. That said, I would still want to work alongside Robert Leporullo to make sure he has the final say, as it is his vision. As for the filming process, I would hope to utilize a lot of practical effects and use CGI when absolutely necessary, similar to what the Series of Unfortunate Events movie did. I figured a lot of these sets could be built on a soundstage or even an abandoned factory like in Super Mario Bros., as long as we keep it safe for the actors, of course. While this book series is meant to be grounded in reality to a certain extent, I still feel we can add some stylistic choices to the architecture. I would use a Series of Unfortunate Events as an example, especially for the exteriors and interiors of the Victorian house. And we would use a lot of photos of various Victorian houses as a reference. When I read the books a lot back in high school, I always used my house as a reference of how the house looked, so we could use some photos of that as a reference, such as some old-fashioned wood paneling wall designs, for example. The upstairs hallway would definitely be a set, and we would make it look like something built into the roof, making it a bit claustrophobic, stuffy, and poorly insulated. We would, however, have to accommodate for the filming, so that's why I think we should have this be a set that can be split into different quadrants. And that way we can get the different camera angles and gear and everything without everyone and everything being crammed. The antechambers also look the same, so I think we wouldn't have to build 20 of them. We should build at least 4 for different angles. As for the portal, that can be done with a green screen. The school is a place we could just film at an actual school, though we may need to do some digital effects at a real location to give it the L shape as described in the book. I feel that putting too much effort into the school would be unnecessary, so using an actual location would suffice. As for Pinedale, I always envisioned this place looking like Summerall, as that's where I live when I read this, but a small town of any sort would suffice. Some places we'll have to customize include a pie diner, an ice cream shop, an entrance to the neighborhood where Taxidian resides, and the sports-themed motel, as those are very specific areas. Also, as for the time period, the book doesn't specify any, but it's implied to be in around 2009, so I want to respect that. Otherwise, it would be modernized with today's political crap and have Xander be a TikToker rather than an aspiring filmmaker. Just like the books, though, it won't explicitly state it's 2009, it'll just mirror that year. Now I will talk about sets and stuff for the other locations. One of the first locations is the Roman Colosseum, which should be done with a mixture of small sets, miniatures, and digital effects. If we film in Colorado, red rocks could be used as a location. The jungle can also just be a regular jungle area, but we could also build some of it artificially as a set. Some miniatures would be used for dynamic wide shots. For the World War II set, it won't be seen much. I mean, it's a long sequence in the book, but that's because books require a lot of details, while film can just show it and get the point across. So it would be a little shorter, but we'd still have some sets built, such as the destroyed house David hides in, unless we find a building that looks similar enough. As we see in this little sketch drawing I did, we would have some sets for the foreground purposes and use chroma key for the background, combining miniatures and CGI. The Civil War set will be similar, but have a lot more, as the Civil War is a prominent location in the books. Here we could find some similar locations and set up tents and encampments while also adding costumes. Some CG and chroma key will be used for distant shots, but most of it will be just on location. Now, I used to envision this as taking place at night, but I don't think any prominent Civil War battles took place at night, so we'll likely have to prioritize real history over my imagination of it, but we'll see. As for this next set, this is very brief, but something we do practically. There's a sequence that takes place at a medieval dungeon, which would be done with an actual set. We could dress the walls with theater-esque cobblestone bricks, have cells with bars, have extras as the prisoners, and set up a stairwell with a torture room with various torture devices. I have some designs here, but I think we'd also build a miniature for reference, and even combine some miniatures similar to what Peter Jackson does. Another part takes place at a snowy mountain. While we could do a real snowy location for some shots, especially in Colorado, we'd also have to accommodate for the safety of the young actors, so we would combine chroma key, background, forced perspective elements, and fake snow. As for the elephant, I figured we'd have a practical elephant leg and a practical head with CGI to aid its eye movements, and then use CG for its full body. The Atlantis set will be featured pretty prominently, but it won't look like Atlantis from usual artwork. It'll look more like a medieval, Middle Eastern style village, so we could choose a meadow location to have some sets built, use some interiors, and use a combination of chroma key and miniatures like we have in these drawings. The house in the past will be easy, as all we'll need is just a forest location with a miniature of the house being built, put there digitally. For the movie set, we can just design it to look pretty artificial and have a lot of the set actually seen as opposed to, as it's supposed to look like a movie set. Now, in the end, they go to a Middle Eastern area where they meet Jesus, and I have an idea of how we could do this. I'm going to save this for the next segment, so just keep that in mind. As for the bone pit, this could be done practically like in the diagram with a small enclosed set and fake human bones. I emphasize on the fake bones because while some studios have used real skeletons, I do not feel comfortable doing that, especially because this would also go against the author's beliefs. As you see here, though, we'd have the set split in half to accommodate for the filming while still working practically. Taxidian's sidekick, Femus, is a really big dude, so I envision using a fat suit with realistic skin coated in scars and use some makeup for his face. So one of the biggest things we need to talk about is who to do it for. I feel this should be independently made, as Hollywood has turned sour recently, though we need a decent enough budget for it to work. I wouldn't want to do Netflix or Hulu because they have the audacity to make absolutely everything hypersexual and obscene for no good reason, not to mention they would probably disregard Robert Labrullo's Christian themes. I want to pay respect to the books and have it be within the PG-13 boundaries. One idea I was thinking about was the Daily Wire. I'm not a big fan of everything they do, but they could serve as a necessary evil as long as they don't politicize it, like they did with Mr. Bertram. One idea I also thought of was Angel Studios. I think they love this, and since they did The Chosen, we could see about utilizing similar sets and costumes for the sequence where they meet Jesus, as that would save some money. And while I'd love to direct all these, I also must take into account that might not happen. So I'd hope to direct at least the first 3, while still serving as an executive producer or something. I also think Brad Silberling could do a great job, as he did with the series of Unfortunate Events, and I may even consider M. Night Shyamalan, as long as he gets some coaching on how to give proper direction towards actors. I also want to make sure we use a lot of unknown actors, as big-name actors would feel very out of place. Some people have recommended Lance Henriksen for Taxidian, but I feel like that would be too meta and on the nose, not to mention due to this backstory. Taxidian would need to be played by somebody with a slightly darker skin color. With that, I also want to go into detail on the characterization of the characters and how to do them justice. For Xander, he's a 15-year-old who is not accustomed to moving, and he also is a movie buff. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I had to run for a second. He dreams of making movies and has his own ideas. The book mentioned that he mainly shot little skateboarding skits, but I'm thinking of adding some of my own ideas and having it where he made his own little movies in the past. David is also a video game fan and is the youngest and most innocent of the 2 boys. So he reminds me of my brother when he was younger, which helps me for adding some inspiration. He's not reckless like Xander, but he also has a big heart and has put himself in harm's way to help others. Toria starts out as kind of the annoying little sister, but then gains the bravery to try and help, which adds some tension as she is being endangered in some instances. The father, Ed, I see him as looking like Mark Wahlberg. He is kind and considerate of others' emotions, but he's also stoic and knows when to be the parent, especially when his kids put themselves in danger. Keel is a nice, friendly, but tough black man who is a nurse and also served in the military. I see him as being similar to Keith David from The Thing, with a little bit of Samuel L. Jackson, so you definitely need to get somebody like him in this. Jesse is in his 90s, though he doesn't have to be played by an actual 90-year-old. I'm thinking someone in his 70s who looks old but is still agile enough. He is sweet and wholesome and acts like a grandfather, and we need somebody who can act similarly for him when they meet him in the past, for his past first. As for Taxidian, per his backstory, he is evil, deranged, and a killer, but he's also smart and cunning, and he is usually in the dark and has to blend into society. I see him as being similar to the Kurgan, though I don't think Clancy Brown would be the right actor unless this ends up being animated, but I feel like Clancy Brown is someone the actor could try to mimic. When he's out in public, he acts cool and calculative like a James Bond villain. When he's alone with his prey, he is deranged and unhinged, almost kind of hammy but not too over the top. For example, when they come to his house, he goes fully deranged and tries to murder them. He then tries to negotiate with them at a diner and acts all cool and normal. This may be seen as breaking character, but it makes sense to the type of person he is. Deranged, but smart. In conclusion, this is a lot of what I think would make for a great movie or miniseries based on the books. I once thought of doing a fan film that combined elements into one film, and I thought of doing a stop-motion miniseries, but I feel like it would work better as live action, and if I'm still in Colorado, I'd hope to meet Robert Leporullo to help him adapt these and bring more attention to them. I have written scripts for all 6 of them, and I made sure to have them detailed as much as possible. Angel Studios might be the best option for adapting these, with Daily Wire as a possible second, as I feel that the people in charge must be ones who will respect Robert Leporullo's vision. Even with my own ideas and interpretations, Robert Leporullo gets the final say as how he wants these to be adapted. He may have his own scripts, but with mine that I wrote, I'd hope that we could use them as a guide or pitch the idea. I want to do some storyboards, which I plan on doing between my new job's work schedule, and if anything, I just hope to meet and talk with the author, as that would be cool. He's written other books that I want to read, and I may consider adapting Comes a Horseman if possible, maybe even the Immortal Files. However, I might just stick with Dreamhouse Kings due to my huge familiarity with them, and I may let others take over with the other books. Anywho, that's my updated thoughts on this. Moving on to the next. Illusion of Gaia is a niche, obscure RPG game for the SNES. You see, since 5th grade, I've always wanted to do a Legend of Zelda movie, and it's something I've planned for several years. As of 2023, I finally fulfilled my wish with making a live-action Zelda movie, making it similar to the 90s dark fantasies, and making it also similar to the works of Ray Harryhausen. They're making an official Zelda movie now, as far as we know, and I'd hope to do some small work on it, and I may consider doing a stop-motion miniseries based on Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, though I'm pretty satisfied with the film that I made so far. While I may never be able to direct an official adaptation, I found the next best thing in Illusion of Gaia. Despite the title designs, this game is different enough from Zelda while still having similar elements, and it serves as a really good family-friendly fantasy story with great characters, adventure, and exploration. Because of how niche it is, I think it would be easy to find a studio and get the rights to do a film adaptation. I know the game was originally from Enix, but they teamed up with Square, and they haven't done anything else with this game. This is also part of what's called the Soul Blazer trilogy, and I could be wrong, but I feel this might be like John Carpenter's Apocalypse trilogy or the Dollars trilogy, where it's 3 stories with similar themes but are not actually connected. However, I mainly only focus on Illusion of Gaia and let others take over on the other 2. Without further ado, here I go into my ideas of adapting Illusion of Gaia. So the basic plot of the game revolves around a fictional version of Earth's history. It is not a high fantasy as it is set in the real world, but it has several fantasy elements. The main protagonist is Will, and he has a group of friends: Eric, the shy kid, Lance, the stoic one, and Seth, the quiet one. They meet other people such as the spoiled Princess Kara and the overconfident Lily. A comet is coming with Dark Gaia, the corrupt twin of Earth's spirit mother Gaia, who helps the protagonists along their journey. The Earth's continents have been rearranged, which was made mainly so the geography could be weird for the sake of the game while also serving the story, and they need to unlock the secret of the Tower of Babel, where Will's father disappeared. There's also an assassin called the Jackal, who is after Princess Kara, though he's only mentioned and doesn't actually appear until the final dungeon. That's the basic gist of the story, but I'm going to go into more detail. As before, this is a spoiler, so I'm going to go over the changes I'd make. If you don't want the spoiled, skip ahead to this time scan. So the story starts with Will, Lance, Eric, and Seth. Princess Kara and her pig Hamlet come to get Will's help, and he rescues her from the king and queen. They aren't given much personality, so I'm going to change that to give the king a redemption arc. I may get my friend Ian Waller to play as King Edward, by the way. They go to the many locations, the first being an Aztec tomb. Incan tomb, sorry about that. Here, Will finds a golden ship in the dark and gets it to sail. And all of the people in the ship act nice and polite, yet something about them feels a little off. As he wakes up and sees his friends, he finds that the golden ship is wooden and decrepit, and all the people he talked to are just skeletons covered in cobwebs, meaning they're ghosts the whole time. I'm going to say this now to avoid spoilers in later sections, but I'd have these extras wearing makeup that make them look a little pale and drained of blood to add to that foreshadowing. They eventually fall off the ship and Will sails on driftwood with Kara. Hamlet is absent for most of the game, but I'm changing that to have Hamlet with them. I'm also making this last for a few days rather than several weeks to add more tension to the story with the comments. I'm also adding Lance, Lily, and Eric traveling together. As for Seth, this is a bit weird and might be part of the mistranslation, but it's later implied that he somehow becomes one with like a whale creature. I'm changing that to him being a spirit guide. However, I still have trouble trying to make him essential to the story, so I once considered combining him and Eric into a hybrid character, but we'll see how that goes. Another change I'm doing is making Jackal an actual character who serves as a main antagonist, with Dark Gaia as the central one. Think Dick Jones and Clarence Boddicker in RoboCop. A lot of people would love this, especially since fans of the game agree that Jackal should have served as more of an actual character and should have had a proper boss battle. We see more development and characterization, such as the love between Will and Kara and Lance and Lily, which is something I greatly admire about the story. Later in the story, they come to a cannibal village and must save some tribal people. We also get a vital part of the story where they're about to be cooked, so the pig Hamlet jumps on the fire and sacrifices himself. This is truly one of the most insane parts of the story, but I feel this just would not translate well to film. My idea to change it is that they go through the village as homage, but it's abandoned, as this part wasn't too essential to the story, though I am still thinking of adding the natives back in somehow. When they get the MacGuffin at Angkor Wat, Jack tries to kill Kara, but Hamlet jumps on her and is stabbed instead. It's different, but it keeps the plot focused and still captures the most important element, which is that Hamlet sacrifices himself. Also, this joke, I'm going to omit that, as that's straight up MCU style, destroying an emotional moment with a joke type of crap. Instead, after their emotional moment, we see the Jackal camping at the tribal area and eating a cooked Hamlet. He says that line, which not only pays homage to the game, but also shows how depraved he is as a character. At this point, King Edward would also sacrifice himself, as he is now more concerned with the safety of his daughter and no longer cares about the power of the commons. Later, they travel to Egypt, and this is where Jackal shows up and meets his untimely demise. I'm gonna let this speak for itself. Now, this is something I'd love to adapt, as it is satisfying and straight up insane, especially for an SNES game. The change I'll make, however, is to make it more climactic. Here they get the final MacGuffin from the pyramids, and Jack kidnaps Kara, taking her to the Tower of Babel as a hostage. They go there and have to fight, and it is here that Jackal meets his demise. That way he's killed before the final encounter with Dark Gaia, making it more climactic and adding more tension.
As for the effects, I would have him wear a suit that makes him look burnt and add the flames with CG, then have a practical skeleton with flames on it for the aftermath shots. They have the final fight, and they are told that they will reincarnate into the next life and forget their memories, so Kara and Will talk to each other one last time. They are then seen in a modern life, and I'll have Hamlet come back to life here, which could hopefully keep this PG. I once read a comment theorizing that this last scene implies that they got killed in traffic and sent back in time to this era, so they are actually passing on to the afterlife, and we saw this non-chronologically, so I'm thinking of hinting elements like that as well. Now that I'm done with the spoilers, I'm gonna go into detail on the adaptation process. First, I'll talk about the story, some changes, and the characterization. So this story is very unique and interesting, but as it is a video game that prioritizes gameplay, some elements have to be changed to accommodate for the context of the film. As mentioned before, the king and queen barely have any purpose, so I'm giving them more character. I'll have them start out wanting the power of the comet, but then becoming concerned about their daughter when they see how unhinged and corrupt the Jackal is. This will lead to Queen Lillian dying and King Edward sacrificing himself to save Kara. Will's grandparents will also have somewhat bigger roles, and I may have them played by Kathy Coleman and Wesley Urer, and I'm thinking of making them victims to the Jackal so they can serve as spiritual guides. As for the main characters, I'm advancing most of their character traits. Will is someone who is a bit cocky and arrogant at first. Kara starts out spoiled but then finds more to life, especially when traveling with Will. Eric is a scaredy cat who learns to face his fears to save his friends. Lance is too stoic and doesn't want to show his soft spot, which acts as a foil to his love interest, Lily, who doesn't want to admit that even she needs help sometimes. As for Seth, I'm still working on advancing him, but I may consider combining him with Eric into a hybrid character since he barely has purpose in the game, but we'll see how that goes. As for the Jackal, I want him to pretty much have all their traits combined. He is cocky and arrogant, he is spoiled and ungrateful, he's too macho and insecure, and thus is truly a coward who uses his killing spree to instill fear into others. He is very much the type of person who shows what our protagonists could become if they don't grow past their flaws. Because of that, I don't want to make him this weepy, sympathetic villain with a redemption arc and a sad backstory. Instead, he's just going to be an absolutely despicable, pure evil villain with a personality and a cathartic, satisfying defeat. Similar to, Big Jack Horner in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Because of that, I'm hoping the actor we choose for him could be as hammy and over the top as possible, a la Raul Julia's portrayal of M. Bison, and I envision him looking like Sting from David Lynch's Dune, with maybe a little bit of Alex from A Clockwork Orange, as seen as this diagram. But we may use some makeup to exaggerate some features a little, such as his chin. I also want to add elements such as the golden ship and the rescuing of the slaves, and I definitely want the raft sequence, as that bit of characterization is one of the things that really solidified my interest in making a movie based on this. I was thinking of omitting the cannibal tribe sequence, but then again, since I also have stuff such as the slave rescue and the magic painting subplot, I may put this back in but have it altered to an extent. Now, I'll go into the production value. Now, some people would likely want this animated. Personally, I enjoy doing live action more than animation because of that close connection with other people, but I still might consider animation. If so, I'd love for it to be hand-drawn in a style similar to Avatar: The Last Airbender, and if CG, maybe similar to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. However, I'm really envisioning this as live action, so I'm going to talk about it in this context, though it may change depending on circumstances. I envision giving this a bit of a 90s campy approach, like I did with my Zelda movie, having certain elements a little exaggerated while still paying homage to the SNES style, similar to SNES artwork and comic books. There would be a good mixture of practical and CG effects and actual sets, as opposed to just doing everything in front of a green screen. Here we have ideas on how we do South Cape, combining sets with chroma key as well as some miniatures. The Moon Tribe's Hill as well as the Aztec Dungeon would have similarities, where we choose a location, use a blue screen, and have large monuments made of styrofoam and aged to look like old stone monuments. Instead of blue screens, we may use painted screens that are digitally fixed, like in a series of unfortunate events. As for the dragon, I figure we could either use an animatronic for this part, or have it be part animatronic, part CG, and use CG for its full body. We'd also use CG for the fire, as that's a lot safer. The lizard monsters could be people in suits with animatronic heads, or they could just be the full body suits and use CG for their heads to make them look more lively, which I think would be a good compromising balance. We'll also have built sets for the caves, such as the one with the paintings, and we'd enhance the vampires a little since they look admittedly generic in the game. For Angkor Wat, I'd use inspiration from the Denver Museum's previous exhibit. As for what I want to accomplish, is making these places look realistic, but also stylistic, similar to Indiana Jones and Lord of the Rings. These would be built sets, but they take inspiration from real-life photos of the actual Angkor Wat, and if we could film some parts in the actual place, that'd also be cool. We do a similar trick with the Egyptian pyramids, having actual sets based on the real-life architecture while also making it stylistic to add to the campy route that I'm going for. Here, I have an idea on how I do the sets and combine chroma key for the distant stuff, such as the chasm. The mummies can be people in makeup and wrappings, as that's something that doesn't really need CG. When they're on the comet, I figured we could make a floor that is glass and has light shining through, and use a cyclorama of these digital screens to make outer space, then use CG to digitally clean up certain blemishes. We'd also have a wind machine. Yes, wind isn't in space, but they're not necessarily in space literally, but spiritually. Therefore, they can have wind blowing through their hair and live up there without oxygen tanks. Make it dramatic. I also think Bo Welch would be perfect as a production designer, so I'm hoping he could work on it too. Another effect we'd use is creating a large map for sequences like this. As you see with this demonstration, not only would this be homage to my favorite movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it'd also serve as a reference to the loading screens in the game. They'd only be used sparingly, of course, as using them too much in a movie would get very old very quickly. I also would recreate the game's intro in a more dynamic way, similarly to Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula. This would combine miniatures and chroma key, and it would be very stylized and dramatic to make it interesting. Basically translating what's in the video game to how it would be in a movie. As for the studios, I figured the main distribution would be Universal, and I hope we could use the 90s Universal logo to add to that 90s nostalgia. I figured we'd also do this with some independent studio with a big budget, especially so it's with the right people. I'd want this to aim for either a hard PG or soft PG-13, and I don't want to do this with a studio who has to make everything obscene for no good reason, like Netflix. We'd also have to get Quintet and Square Enix involved, and video game companies are becoming more involved in film adaptations of video games, so this shouldn't be an issue. I also think making this into a movie would work, since it's a more straightforward story. Nothing against Square Enix's Final Fantasy games, but those games are so varied in the plots that making a single movie based on them just wouldn't do them justice. I'd also hope to keep physical media alive and release this on Blu-ray with audio commentaries, Easter eggs, and tons of behind the scenes. I mean true behind the scenes, not these 5-minute talking head videos. I want to do the same with Dreamhouse Kings, as we need more behind the scenes documentaries as well. The Batman is one of few modern films I've seen that had this, so I have some hope that we could keep this alive. So I wanted to go ahead and bring more attention to this niche little video game, and also discuss ideas for a film adaptation. I would love to adapt this and have this be my big fantasy film, and I'd love to do it similar to other fantasy films from the 90s and 2000s, while also paying respect to the game. Maybe it could bring more attention to the games for a possible animated series or game reboot, and it would bring more attention to the Soul Blazer games. it would also be such a fun movie to work on and tell a great character-driven story, while also bringing some maturity to kids' movies. Most kids' movies today are so sanitized, and I agree that there are things that kids shouldn't see, but we could use some more kids' movies with emotional maturity, like The Hobbit or The Chronicles of Narnia story, and I think this film would bring back more of this. Anyway, while we need more original ideas, and I have plenty to talk about, there's nothing wrong with adaptations, as those have existed since the dawn of film, and this could make for a really good video game adapted movie. Land of the Lost began as a TV series from the 1970s from Sid and Marty Krofft, the creators of HR Pufnstuf. It follows a family of Rick Marshall and his teen son Will and preteen daughter Holly, who accidentally fell in a rift in time and space, leading them to a pocket dimension with a lot of stuff lost from the universe, such as dinosaurs and other extraterrestrial beings. The antagonists are the Sleestack, who have de-evolved from the Altrusians who designed the world, Enoch being one of the last ones who accidentally came to this future when an earthquake hit and sent him through time. Because they didn't think the show would be renewed, they came up with a clever idea for the Season 1 finale. Here, they find that they were supposed to have died when falling over the falls, and so in order for them to exit the land, an equal mass must enter. So they make it where their alternate past selves enter, so they're kind of responsible for their entry, though they're kind of an alternate version in Season 2 and 3. Yeah, it's a little confusing, but still very interesting. Season 2 also had really awesome moments of adventure. Season 3 is a bit overhated, but I won't deny that it has its problems. They did a reboot and possibly semi-sequel in the 90s, and it was alright, though not as great as the original. Most people, unfortunately, only know about the show because of the 2009 movie with Will Ferrell, which is why I really want to talk about this movie idea. So, I just want to get this out of the way. I'm a bit upset that the show has become forgotten because of the Will Ferrell movie. While I may sound biased, I'm not really a big Will Ferrell fan. I have my exceptions. I mean, he was pretty funny in Saturday Night Live. I mean, who could forget this skit?
Well, why didn't you meet him? Hey, new friend, come on down.
Meet our new friend, Friendship. F is for friendship. I'm not sure that this is a good idea.
And I think he can be funny when jokes are written for him, like for rather than by him, like Megamind. But his projects also just feel so much like vanity projects. I actually honestly prefer Adam Sandler because even with his faults, he's such a nice, down-to-earth guy. And also, while Will Ferrell, they just feel so much like egotistical vanity projects. And also, while this Land of the Lost movie has the same problems as the Cat in the Hat movie, I personally prefer Cat in the Hat over Land of the Lost because it's so batshit insane, while Will Ferrell's Land of the Lost feels just so painfully average. I also don't necessarily mind a spoof of the show, as I love The Marshal Season 3, and I don't mind a crass spoof since I love Legend of Neil, but this one just isn't really funny or clever. I loved it when I first saw it, but I was literally 13, so it only makes sense. There are a few jokes that are actually funny and cleverly make fun of the show, like the giant walnut joke. Let's face it, that joke was hilarious. But aside from these, most of these are just very childish and unfunny toilet jokes like drinking piss. I mean, seriously, maybe consuming excrement on its own was funny when Pink Flamingos did it for the first time, but now it's just stupid. Not to mention, there's also the issue of Holly falling in love with Rick Marshall. Good God, I'm glad they changed the characters for this, but when you know the characters from the show, this just feels so dirty. And even looking at this on its own merits, it just doesn't have any good build-up to justify it. It has the same energy as...
By the way, I'd like to say I've always found you extremely attractive.
So that's not even an issue because it's different from the show. It's also an issue because it didn't have any good build-up. And there's one major issue I have, however. You see, I have the original out-of-print Rhino DVDs with all the cool features. They released new DVDs to coincide with the movie, but they removed all those features, having only ones from the movie. It would be one thing if they had both, but I wish they'd re-release the series on Blu-ray with all the features and some new ones. Also, a little update, I found that they did do this. They re-released, they released a kind of limited Blu-ray that had the other features, so at least there's that. Another sad thing is that this film was directed by Brad Silberling, who did a series of unfortunate events. I'm not sure how much was his fault or the studio's, but he very well could have done a decent family film that was faithful to the series. I'm willing to bet that he was just hired, because I would never guess this was a film by him if I wasn't told. It just looks so different and painfully average. I plan to do a true review of this film one day, but I just had to put in my 2 cents. I still don't think this is Will Ferrell's worst movie, as Holmes and Watson is way worse, and as far as bad adaptations of TV shows go, I definitely don't think this movie is anywhere near as bad as The Last Airbender, but it still was just such a disservice to the original show. Without that out of the way, I'm going to talk about the show and how it should be properly rebooted. So firstly, I got to meet Kathy Coleman and Wesley Earp back in 2024, and I'm hoping my brother gets a chance. I also met Sid Croft, though unfortunately we'll never get to meet Spencer Milligan or Marty Croft as they're no longer with us. I was also a little socially awkward, so I hope I didn't accidentally come off as rude to them, but it was still an honor to meet them, and I want my brother to have the chance. They should have cameos in this film, and I'd probably have them cameo as scientists monitoring the greatest earthquake ever known that happens to the Marshall family when they're high on the rapids. I also think we can improve the story and characters a bit, as the original was still limited due to the rules of television. What I mean is that while the show has continuity, every episode had to stand on its own, as it wasn't common for people to binge watch shows, and home media hadn't caught on yet. I believe it should be rebooted as a new series rather than movies, as this can flesh out a lot and even remake classic episodes. I would especially love for them to do a remake of Follow That Dinosaur, as that is one of my top favorite episodes and one of the darkest ones too, for that matter. There could also be more character development, such as finding out more about their life and their mother who passed away prior to the event. There are small details to follow, such as Holly's horse, Comanche, and a time where Will and Rick saw some punks harassing a man named Mr. Gurler. This could also add more characterization and serve as a window to their lives before going to the land. Also, I think this series could end with the Marshalls sailing on an ocean, and then the rest of the series could be about the Porter family from the 90s remake, as that is believed to be a semi-sequel with an adult Holly, which was an original idea that was semi-scrapped due to them being unable to get Kathy Coleman. Another unique thing I hope this reboot could do is recapture the surrealism of the original. The original had such a surreal, foreboding tone a la Majora's Mask, and it gave the show a special identity. The way I describe the look is akin to displays in museums. It just has such a special kind of look that makes the world look a bit surreal and lively, while simultaneously a little artificial. To recreate that, they should definitely get Bo Welch to do the set designs. While I don't like the Will Ferrell movie that much, I still think the special effects were great, and they kept the CGI sparingly. The set design had a stylistic look that did a good job at capturing the Sid Marty Krofft style of the original, while also being updated. While I don't mind CG being used for the dinosaurs, I'd still have an animatronic for Dopey to recapture the idea that he's this cute baby dinosaur that's friends with the gang. The costumes used for the Sleestaks and Chalker are also salvageable ideas from the movie they could use. One thing I'd fix is this though. I love that Enoch was a guy in a realistic costume, while CGI was just used for his mouth, but I'd probably have a puppeteered mouth that opens and closes, and then use CGI to smooth out the lip movements like Goro from Mortal Kombat. Because it is kind of somewhat obvious that his mouth is animated, but with a puppeteered mouth that's aided with CGI, that at least would make it look like his jaws are actually moving when he speaks. Also, there's one thing I'm split on. In some instances, I love that the pylon's interiors in the show were cold and dark, especially in this episode. However, you never really get the idea that the pylon is supposed to be bigger on the inside unless they tell you. If anything, it could be seen as something like the igloo in Nanook of the North and be just a practical filming issue. I do love what they did with the pylon in the movie, making it look like this, though I'd still have the cold and dark one for certain instances, and maybe even have one similar, but with a surreal star-like patterns, like in the Denver Museum space exhibit. While I think a new TV series would be better, I also had a worst-case scenario of a movie, especially as a fan film. My initial idea was to be a trilogy, with the first being based solely off of Season 1 and having the corrupt Sleestack from Season 2 as the villain. I would even make this corrupt Sleestack a brother of Salach, who betrayed him. The second one would be based primarily on Season 2 and feature the Zarn as the antagonist. Season 3 would then be based on the Porter family in the 90s remake. Unlike the Will Ferrell movie, this wouldn't have toilet humor, it would be family friendly, it would be G or PG, and it would be faithful to the TV shows. Some changes would have to be made, as it would be taking elements from an episodic TV show and converting them into a feature-length movies with their own 3-act structures, but they would still be respectful and faithful to the show and the Crofts brothers' vision. They do want to reboot the show as an apology to the movie, but it's been in development hell for a while, and I'd hope I could join them and give some writing ideas, maybe even utilize my theater class experience to help with some of the set construction. All in all, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on the matter and bring more attention to the TV show, and, the hope of bringing a faithful reboot. It especially annoys me that people are more familiar with the movie than the TV show, and even though I still don't think the movie is as bad as The Last Airbender, it's still frustrating that it practically replaced and buried the original TV show. Hopefully a faithful reboot could come, reintroducing people to the classic, and bury the movie. I also think we could get Brad Silberling involved, as it could redeem him and fix his career. I mean, he is a great director, it's just that the movie practically destroyed his career and gave him a bad reputation. So in the end, these are very niche ideas that I would love to adapt and bring more attention to. The Dreamhouse Kings series is a book series that practically nobody talks about. I mean, my brothers talked about it, but that's because I introduced him to it, so it's kind of a given. And I went back to reading it and even wrote scripts based on it. And so I'm hoping I could meet up with Robert Luperullo since he lives in Colorado, and maybe we could get in touch with Angel Studios to get this made. Illusion of Gaia, I think that should be easy because it's an extremely niche game that almost nobody talks about. But if I can't get a studio to make it, I'd probably make it as a fan film, similar to Hero of Time, Sage of Darkness, or that long-lost Wizard of Oz idea. That way I can have creative control and everything like that. But I feel like that would also be a really good story to adapt. And Land of the Lost, I wouldn't say it's as niche, but it is kind of sad that the Will Ferrell movie kind of overshadows it. So that's why I would hope that they would do a reboot justice. And I would still do a fan film, like maybe a 2-part, 3-part fan film. And I would love to have Wesley Ear and Kathy Coleman have cameos, but we never know if something like that will happen. And of course, I don't want to use AI for any of this. Like, I'd rather look crappy and honest than good and dishonest. Just like Joe Street said when talking about that Wizard of Oz idea.
This is the behind the scenes that these guys posted so many years ago, and we've had the best time with the best cast and crew creating something that, sure, may not look entirely professional, but that's the one thing that AI can never take from us. True human creativity. Sure, AI can technically generate a video of a realistic-looking Tin Man or a talking lion, but I would rather watch this every day of the week than that AI stuff. Films.
See, I don't want to use any of this AI crap. I want it to actually be built by hand, done by real people, and actually be truly honest. I try to use a lot of the same old-fashioned special effects for a Land Lost fan film, and I'd try to combine practical effects and CG for an Illusion of Gaia film. And, you know, if anything, I could possibly help out with an official Land of the Lost remake. Maybe I could get the Dreamhouse Kings series made into a movie. Maybe I could also get Illusion of Gaia made into a movie. I just wanted to share these ideas to see if I could ever get them made, and please share your thoughts. If any of you guys know these very obscure IPs, definitely share some of your ideas.